you?
This valuation story in the GCC, I mean, it's really been transformed. I've brought up a chart just to give our viewers some additional context. This is how much Gulf stocks are trading in terms of forward earnings. So you're looking at multiples. Take a look at that. Take a look at how that develops throughout 2016. The line in red there being the Qatari stocks. You got your line in purple. Those are your Dubai stocks. And for additional context, because we like to do that at Bloomberg, we put the MSCI emerging market benchmark as well. You can see it's right in the middle. That's your line on white. So stocks are no longer cheap, are they? Especially in Qatar.
No, they're not. You're absolutely right. They've rallied, obviously, post the Saudi bond issuance and then of the OPEC announcement on oil. But I think in the context of both emerging markets and global markets, what's interesting about the GCC markets is the dividend yield story. Okay, they have a much higher dividend yield than other emerging markets. In particular, if you look at the dividend yield of MSCI World, it's about 2.54. The EM is at 2.55, and the GCC, MSCI GCC is about 3.78. So investors look at it as more of a dividend play, given that there's still a lot more in terms of what they can get out versus other asset classes.
So we've got the oil price stabilizing a little bit around $50 a barrel. Again, we've got the meeting this weekend. What do you expect on that front, and how is that going to affect your stock selection going into 2017?
Well, you were in Abu Dhabi yesterday, and there seems to be an optimism by both the Nigerian and UAE oil minister that things probably will work out. But I couldn't help but hearing the comments of your the previous person this morning, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, enforceability and expecting those cutbacks is going to be very important, and that's what the market's going to be watching.
Okay, stabilization in oil prices, as you said. We are seeing also an improved macro picture. How is that going to affect private equity in the GCC?
Well, I think private equity has a big role to play in the GCC, and I would like to see more of it for the next few years. I mean, for example, we're considering setting up a private equity fund focusing on SMEs that need growth capital in Qatar, in the UAE, and in Saudi Arabia, given that the banking sector no longer is willing to lend to these companies. So we hope that we'll see more private equity activity in the next 12 months. And obviously, opportunities for us from a valuation point of view are becoming more interesting in terms of expectation of what we bid for these assets.
Are there sectors that interest you more for your investors than others?
Ooh, well, I mean, it sounds like you're... Healthcare is interesting. We're looking at healthcare, but not from the asset side, more on the sort of technology side. We like the transportation and logistics sector, and we're definitely looking at other sort of opportunistic opportunities within PE selectively in the GCC region.
Femi, I've pulled up the member-ranked returns function. Again, this is year-to-date, so these are the stocks that have performed very well versus the stocks that have really lagged. And you can see you got Shua Capital there. You would have gotten 269% on your money. You've got quite a few insurance stocks to the upside. Quite a bit of pressure on some of the banks, Commercial Bank of Dubai and Mashreq Bank. As you look at the Dubai story, which again has been really fascinating in 2016, given that it's been more diversified than some of its peers, 2017, what happens here?
Well, I think that generally...
I mean, the funny part is that even though we've had the tremendous turnaround story or the tremendous resilience, we're still trading cheaper than Qatar, still trading cheaper than MSCI emerging markets.
Well, first of all, I mean, some of those stocks that you've mentioned in the chart, we wouldn't invest in, given that they lack corporate governance, they lack transparency, they don't have proper IR functions. We don't know visibility in the earnings for 2017 and beyond. That's going to be very important for us. I mean, a company like Amwal definitely is a bellwether company, and it is basically your gateway into the UAE market, you know, whether it's on the hospitality side or the real estate side. It's going to be forward guidance from these companies is going to be very important for us to understand how we position our portfolios and how investors should. And that's probably something that the companies should do a better job explaining how the environment is, the challenges they face ahead, and what are they doing. For example, yesterday, Mr. Al-Abbar mentioned that he's looking at cost efficiencies.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't specific, which is fine, but at least now we understand that he's addressing that, and this is a welcome comment.
Yeah. The implied probability function on the Bloomberg, again, calculating 100% likelihood of a rate hike in December. So that's pretty much baked in. But the rate hike, by virtue of the peg to the Saudi riyal, or the Saudi riyal peg to the dollar and the AED peg to the dollar, that means that that's going to translate and going to push into this part of the world as well. What does the rate hike mean for the GCC? Is there some risk here?
Well, I think the combination of two things, probably. Will banks bid up for deposits? I think they will. I mean, you're going to probably see that in the next 4 weeks, by the way, when you do the end-of-year window dressing. But potentially, it has the other effect is how will they re-rate or reprice their loans? Okay, and so it's this how management of these banks will address some of these challenges. I think clearly some banks will be able to do it in the countries that they operate, and others will not.
So as we look to 2017, what about the Saudi story and perhaps stories outside of Qatar and the UAE? Is there anything on your agenda, on your radar that's interesting?
Well, we think Saudi Arabia, being the sort of the biggest economy in the region with the largest market cap, is the most interesting from a diversification point of view, from a liquidity point of view. We do like Qatar. We think actually Qatar has some interesting stories. We like defensively positioned companies. I call it a defensive offense posturing, where we want strong management, good free cash flow, and obviously growth opportunity, given that we see a better or more stable price of oil versus what we saw this year.